Hey kids, welcome to the Pioneer Museum COVID-19 tour, part 3. We still got our masks on, a little bit hard to breathe, but I think we'll be able to work our way through it. Today we're going to look at, or in this part, we're going to look at a Pioneer home, a living room, a bedroom, and some of the things that go along with that. And Jim is going to show us what we have. What do you have there, Jim?
Well, this here is a hand-powered vacuum. Now kids, we know how much you love doing chores. Now imagine if the electricity went out, no worries. You can be the power for this one.
Yeah, they'd like that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And here we've got an original carpet sweeper. This would have been used around the early 1900s, and just go along your floor and pick up all the dirt and grime. Pioneers in those days didn't have floors like we do today, so there would have been a lot to pick up. Now if you notice up here, we have some original paintings. Notice the detail on those. Your great-grandparents may have had these on their walls. Maybe your grandparents still have them on their walls today.
And what's that behind you, Jim? It looks like a closet.
Yeah, so this is a wardrobe. They didn't always have closets. They had much smaller homes in those days, so they had these sort of miniature closets that they would have had in their home to see the different sorts of fashion. I don't think that's really my style or color, Lenny.
No, it's a little drab.
And if you look over here, this is a Walnut Bedstead. This is well over 120 years old, and this would have been brought by the pioneers. So can you imagine coming all the way from New York or Connecticut and lugging this the entire way? It shows you how important these types of things were to the pioneers. So other things include some different doll buggies. You can see here, handmade toys. You wouldn't have found these at Walmart or Toys R Us. And over here is a camelback trunk. That would have been brought over via wagon, or maybe they walked and carried it. Very heavy, but they didn't have motor vehicles in those days, so you just had to make do.
Okay, very interesting, Jim. Now we're going to go into the kitchen, the dining room in the kitchen. We'll start in the kitchen with Donna. Right this way. And here's Donna looking over her recipe. She's an excellent cook. So what are you making for supper tonight?
I really don't know yet. I would like to go to the local restaurant, but we can't at this point, so I'll have to think of something. Kids, how would you like to come home and see this in your kitchen? This is what they had for refrigerators back in the 1900s. Somebody would come over with a big block of ice, and they would put it down here, and it would cool everything that would be in your refrigerator.
So no electricity then?
No electricity at all. What we did for electricity, what we use electricity, was this really nice looking dishwasher. How would you like to load this? You would take and put a kettle of hot water after you get all the dishes lined up in here, and you pour the water on, plug it into electricity, close the lid, and put in some soap powder. You've got yourself a dishwasher. Not like today at all. Or, back in the day, they made butter. They churned butter with this. Here, how about this nifty stove that your great-grandparents most likely used? They would fill this with coal or wood, and that's how they would heat the house and cook food on that.
You know, before we go any further, Donna, I had a couple of questions from students about some of these things. McKenna asked about the icebox. You explained what it does. How old do you think it is?
Oh, I bet it's probably got to be 80, 90 plus years old.
That sounds about right. And Waylon asked, does it have a freezer?
No, this one does not. I'm sure there's some that did, but this particular one did not have a freezer.
And Madison asked, why does a stove look different than stoves today?
Well, like I said, this one here, you would put coal or wood in. The one over here, again, you would put wood in. This one's probably hooked up to electricity, most likely. There's your oven. Pretty small. You couldn't bake a very large meal in that one. Over here, we have milk bottles. You just don't go to the grocery store to get your milk. You have somebody deliver your milk once a week. And it would be a gentleman in a dairy truck, and he would come every week with a number of milk bottles, milk that you had requested. This is a display of some of the dishes they had used back in the day. A lot of us right now probably use the good old chinette, where they had actual china. And then over here, we will go into the dining area. This big piece of furniture is called a Hoosier. In other words, what we use for pantries today, where we would store all our food and dishes and such in there.
Okay, now they didn't have cell phones until fairly recently in terms of history. What did they use for telephones back in the early 1900s?
Oh, they would use this nice looking wall hanging phone right here.
So how did that work?
Well, you would pick up the earpiece, crank it, and an operator would talk to you. And she would ask you who you're dialing, or if you know the number, you'd give the number to her. And then you could be connected to whoever you'd like to talk to.
Is that a private phone call then?
Oh no, anybody can listen in. So you want to watch what you're talking about and who you're talking about.
Interesting.
And this particular telephone was the first rural telephone in Martin County back in 1904. So this is well over 100 years old. And then over here, this is the telephone books that they used. This one's pretty fragile, but look at the phone numbers. They're not like they are today. Numbers and letters. And every day you would sit down to a table like this. All very nicely done, all the good china. Like I said, we didn't use china or paper plates back then. It was good china that we used.
You know, I'd like to point out one other thing that we didn't talk about before, and that's right over there. It's the meat carving bench from Park Street Grocery. Park Street Grocery was a very well-known family-owned grocery store back in the 1950s through 80s probably. And that's the meat carving block from that grocery store.
A lot of meat was carved on that block.
And they sold candy and pop and penny sticks of gum and things like that. Okay, that concludes part 3 of our Pioneer Museum COVID-19 tour.